So my name is Erik Lindbergh. My grandfather did something. Does anybody know what that was? One person, all right. Yeah? Cool. So he was let me just go through my slides, actually. That'll be better. This is a little bit about the Lindbergh Foundation and who we are, and then I'll tell you a little bit more.
Almost 100 years ago, on a dark morning that seemed to hold no promise, a small plane was getting ready for takeoff on a muddy field in New York. The plane was heavy with fuel and the runway was soft, so people pushed. The plane moved slowly. As it struggled, the people kept pushing. The plane gathered momentum. The people kept pushing. Finally, the plane moved faster than they could run. They let it go. Charles Lindbergh was on his way to Paris, and a whole new era of human life on this planet had begun. At the Lindbergh Foundation, we know great dreams can come true, and that even on the darkest mornings, that promise remains. So in honor of the 100th anniversary of the flight that gave wings to us all, this foundation will be like the people who pushed that little plane toward the sky. Our dream is to help lift hopes of a better tomorrow out of the mud and set them on their valiant way.
Sometimes technology doesn't work right. And I'll say, AI is easy, AV is hard. But sometimes we have to pivot and we have to use the microphone on our computer and hold it up. That's how life is. My grandfather moved to St. Louis in 1923. Why did he do that? Because the air races were going on. When things fly, it's fun and compelling and interesting. And what he found here in St. Louis was a unique camaraderie between the pilots who lived here. And he started flying the mail for Robertson Aircraft between St. Louis and Chicago. And it was during that time that he learned about the Orteig Prize. What was the Orteig Prize? He thought it was $25,000 to be given to the first team that could fly between the cities of New York and Paris in either direction. He didn't have the money. He had $2,000 in his life savings. And so he had to find, like any entrepreneur, he had to find backing for his idea. So he went out and talked to his friends, and 9 St. Louisans chipped in, and together with his $2,000, they raised $10,580 to buy the Spirit of St. Louis. He went down to California to the Ryan Aeronautical Company and bought the airplane, and then flew it across from San Diego to where his backers were here in St. Louis. Now, Raymond Orteig was a guy who owned a hotel, 2 hotels in New York, and he had the idea, we'll put up this prize, and he did it in 1919. Well, it took a long time until 1927, and it spurred a lot of the world's leading aviators at the time to try for that prize. Grandfather was backed by these 9 folks, some of whom your names are familiar with, some not. Bixby and Lambert Field. Those are the folks here in St. Louis who believed in my grandfather and that dream and backed it. So just again, using the entrepreneur as a metaphor, this was a startup company. It was a long shot, but they backed his spirit. And the spirit that was alive here that welcomed him to St. Louis was evident in his backers, and it enabled them to name the plane the Spirit of St. Louis, which of course became the best branding exercise St. Louis has ever engaged in. The Spirit of St. Louis. He made it. He lived. After 33 hours in an unstable aircraft, you think these are unstable? his was also designed to be unstable, so it would wake him up if he fell asleep. It would start banking, and he'd feel the G-forces and hear the noise. So I like to say a primitive autopilot by building the Spirit with an unstable wing. It changed the world's perception about what aviation could be used for. Before my grandfather flew across the Atlantic, people who flew in airplanes were known as barnstormers and daredevils and flying fools. And after he flew across the Atlantic, people who flew in airplanes were called pilots and passengers. That's the shift in perspective that happened as a result of that prize and my grandfather winning it. It had just an extraordinary impact on the number of pilots, the number of airports, and the number of people who started to travel by air. But that biggest thing was the shift in the world's mindset. And those ripples continue today. So in 1996, I came to St. Louis for my first time. And my friends like Greg Marinac over there toured me around the city and saw Lindbergh Boulevard, and there was a cubist image of my grandfather in the aviator goggles on the side of a building, and it was Lindbergh this and Lindbergh that. It was really overwhelming. I think I was a little bit allergic to the Lindbergh legacy at that point. Obviously, I've gotten over that. But it was an extraordinary opportunity, and what we did under the arch in St. Louis with 20 astronauts and the head of NASA was announce a new prize, modeled after the Orteig Prize, called the X Prize. The idea was we would give $10 million to the first private company that could build a spaceship and fly into space with the equal weight and mass of 3 passengers, return safely and do it again, and revolutionize the space travel industry. How crazy is that? We really should have failed. It was really kind of ridiculous. You can see that trajectory up into space, and up to this point it was only governments and big business that could send people into space. Well, we borrowed a page out of that playbook of my grandfather and started the new Spirit of St. Louis organization here at the St. Louis Science Center. And we got 100 people to back our crazy project. And did I mention it was crazy? We probably should have failed, but we succeeded. Along the way, we were down to half a person in the office. We had to sustain this thing for 9 years as a nonprofit, and it was going down. And Greg and I hatched a plan. I actually pitched him on it. Maybe I could fly across the Atlantic on the 75th anniversary of grandfather's flight in a modern plane. And Greg tried to talk me out of it. I guess he liked me or something. Didn't want me to kill myself. But as we got talking, well, we could do this, and if we could do that, we could do this. And we grew it into a plan. And in a year and a half, we had a special plane repurposed that could do the mission. And we made partnerships with the St. Louis Science Center and aircraft manufacturer Lancair and a whole host of other companies to fly from San Diego to St. Louis to New York, and then New York to Paris. And there's sort of the flight path right there. The History Channel decided to follow that and do a documentary program, and they called it Lindbergh Flies Again. Okay, not really. They called it Lindbergh Flies Again, but in homage to Jimmy Stewart in the Spirit of St. Louis movie that came out in, I think, 1953, where they put a fly in the cockpit for him to talk to because they needed dialogue. I scanned a fly onto my computer, and that's why we have Flies Again. Oh. So I took off from San Diego to St. Louis, and the weather was great, and they had a special send-off with a fire truck, and it was about a 10-hour flight, and I realized halfway through, with really bad turbulence bouncing me around and a long duration flight, I think that flight was over 7 hours, that grandfather did it at night when it's cool out and there's no turbulence. So I failed to learn that lesson, but I made it to St. Louis. Woo! Awesome! Yeah! And I love how the tower is wrapping up the plane. Nice. So perseverance pays off. That is awesome. So it was Youth Aviation Day at Spirit of St. Louis Airport when I took off to fly to New York, and the weather was down and I was worried about the thunderstorms, and I didn't get this photo until later of the Civil Air Patrol cadets lining the runway when I took off. You can see how low the clouds are. What a gift. That spirit is alive today here in St. Louis. And I took off from New York, and I'll just say my sister said goodbye to me in case, it was the last time she ever saw me. And I took off with my airplane 1,000 pounds over maximum certificated gross weight. And what does that mean? It's like these airplanes. You really shouldn't do it. And if it flies, you want to stay flying until you burn off that extra 1,000 pounds of gas, because you're not supposed to land with it, because landing is the hard interface with the land when your plane can come apart if you're overweight. So anyway, then flew over the Atlantic. We had built X-Prize mission control at the St. Louis Science Center over by the planetarium on the other side with a bank of computers, like a NASA mission control. Totally cool. We had astronauts and weather specialists in there talking to me while I was flying across the Atlantic, and they had a History Channel people in there inventing some drama that I didn't really have. I had some other drama that you don't see on that History Channel program, but it was really an extraordinary opportunity, and we used the internet, and actually, which was in its infancy, and a few people followed along. That was cool. My ultimate goal was not necessarily to fly across the Atlantic, it was to survive. And it worked. I lived. And it was my first time to France, first time to Europe, and I flew myself. That was pretty cool. The hard part about this journey was that when I turned 21, I went from being a state champion gymnast to disabled. And by age 30, I couldn't walk. I had both of my knees were bone on bone. And this is one of the things that life will throw at you. None of us here gets out alive, and we're faced with challenges, physical challenges sometime. And I was lucky in 1996, I had my knees replaced. And I got another chance at life by taking a brand new biotechnology drug that allowed me to start rebuilding a normal life. And with that, I shed my Lindbergh phobia and was able to really walk in my grandfather's footsteps, even though I knew I could never fill his shoes. And that was a big journey for me personally. So, flying across the Atlantic enabled me to leverage the X-Prize Foundation. And that kept it alive. We got 500 million media impressions. That was before social media. And enabled us to raise enough funds that we could actually get a hole-in-one insurance policy for the $10 million prize. I didn't tell you we didn't have the money, did I? And we vowed never to announce an unfunded prize after that because it was so hard. But in 2002, Spaceship One took off out of the Mojave Desert and flew up into space, 62 miles, 328,000 feet. It returned safely and did it again within 2 weeks. And that changed the way the world thought about space flight. So those flights jump-started the private spaceflight industry that we know of today. And with the Science Center in the background, we gave away the $10 million check to Burt Rutan, who built Spaceship One, and Paul Allen was his backer, and these are our X-Prize compatriots, and there's Greg Marinac in the back. Raise your hand, Greg. Do a little dance. What an extraordinary thing to have had a hand in changing the way the world thinks about spaceflight. As a small group of people, we got Spaceship One hanging in the Air and Space Museum next to the Spirit of St. Louis. We changed the way the world thinks about spaceflight, and it led all of us to ask ourselves, how do we do that again? What do we do? How do you follow that one? The extraordinary thing is that we attracted the likes of Musk, Bezos, and Branson, and they started their new space lines, and they're vying to take your dollars to fly you up to the space station and back, and that's incredible disruption, incredible entrepreneurship that has changed the way we fly into space. Not only that, but the X Prize reinvigorated the incentive prize industry. These prizes helped drive the beginning of aviation with the Daily Mail Prize and the prize to fly across the English Channel. And now, today, we, wearing my X Prize hat, have over $500 million in prizes, either active or given. So X Prize is working on trying to solve the grand challenges facing humanity using incentive prizes. For example, the $100 million prize for carbon removal funded by the Musk Foundation of Elon Musk. So what is the next chapter? What are we doing at the Lindbergh Foundation? Why are we here in St. Louis? We've just moved to St. Louis. We've put our headquarters here to plan for the 100th anniversary of my grandfather's flight. My grandparents flew around the world from the 1920s to the 1930s, 40s, through the 70s, and saw firsthand that the technology that enabled us to travel could also harm our quality of life. And when my grandfather died, friends of his, Neil Armstrong and General Jimmy Doolittle and others at the Explorers Club in New York City, said we need to carry on this vision of balance, because between technology and the environment, the fulcrum of that balance is our quality of life, and we need to maintain that. So the Lindbergh Foundation is now 47 years old. We're counting down to the 100th anniversary of that flight, and we could think of no better place on the planet that has the spirit of St. Louis than St. Louis. So we are now here. We're building our education programs here. We want to expand, so if you have a school that you want to expand to, we'd love to have you. We're also working on an incentive prize for SAF, Sustainable Aviation Fuel. We're working with the ag tech community to look at how a moonshot of how plants sequester nitrogen in the ground, so we can revolutionize how we grow our food and potentially fuel. These are audacious goals. These are goals we'll probably fail at. Or will we? With an incentive prize, with the right incentive and the right crazy people trying to solve that problem, we might succeed. And we have to try. So we've given over $3 million in grants over the years. We've given 50 plus Lindbergh Awards. We started the LEAP program, Lindbergh Electric Aircraft Prizes, to help develop the fledgling electric aircraft industry. And we've built an electric Spirit of St. Louis down at Embry-Riddle in Daytona. We're hoping to see that fly in the next year or two as they replace the battery packs and start that flight testing. We have a long history of doing Lindbergh Innovation Forums. We'd love to bring these into St. Louis and host those over the next couple of years. My favorite program of all was one we called the First Families of Flight. And we brought students from the US, from Monaco, and from Germany together to the Aero Friedrichshafen show in Friedrichshafen, Germany. And we brought Sergei Sikorsky and Andre Borschberg of Solar Impulse. I know he flew through with his solar airplane with Bertrand Piccard here, and Cornelius Dornier, one of the families that built the first flying boats in Europe. And at the end, my favorite, Wolfgang von Zeppelin of Led Zeppelin. Just kidding. The Zeppelin Company, they built the dirigibles, and they have an incredible museum in Friedrichshafen. But bringing those people together and hosted by His Serene Highness Prince Albert II of Monaco, who is one of the sovereign leaders on our planet who really cares about the environment and the balance between technology and the environment. I'd like to bring Prince Albert to St. Louis, and you guys are going to help me make that happen, okay? Yeah? Yeah. Okay. After I flew across the Atlantic, Greg Marinac helped get the new Spirit of St. Louis that I flew donated here to the St. Louis Science Center, and now it's flying again, and Aero Careers, a small nonprofit that helps people take their first flights here in St. Louis, is flying it. So if you know kids who are really into flying and they want to take a first flight, I am happy to make that connection for you, see if they'll give you a flight. And I just flew it on Tuesday. I could still land it after 17 years. That was pretty cool. So thank you so much to Seyer Industries and Starrag and the St. Louis Science Center and our Spirit of St. Louis 100 members. Dr. Craver, I could see you out there. You raise your hand. Thank you so much. Is Cindy Peters here? She's gone already, but another one of our Spirit of St. Louis 100 members that helped us make this happen. Did I forget something there? No, we're good. So how do these two impossible dreams come true? It's in the name of the plane. It's the Spirit. So my grandfather had applied for the Orteig Prize, the $25,000 prize, and he wasn't eligible to win the prize because he needed 60 days to pass from the date of the application to before he flew. And he called Harry Knight, his backer here in St. Louis, and said, I'm not going to be eligible for the prize, but the weather's clearing and I want to take off. And Harry said, to hell with the money, Slim. When you're ready, you fly. That's the Spirit of St. Louis. That's the Spirit that was alive here, backed my grandfather, and sent him across. And of course, they couldn't not give him the prize once he won. So we're in that countdown. Thank you so much for coming and participating in this. As you can see, it's really hard work, and you guys deserve a shout out because this stuff isn't easy. Yes! Woo! Right on. I love it. That Spirit is alive. And aerospace is not easy. It's really hard. But if we apply ourselves, we can make it happen. So thank you so much to all of you. This has been great. We have some awards to give away, and then I promise I'll shut up. Are we ready? Right on. This is third place, and it goes to number 13, the honored one. Come on up. Where are you? Oh, yes! We have another one flying. Awesome. Hey, congratulations. And if you'll go over here and get a photo taken, that would be awesome. Okay. Second place, number 6, Warp Star. Hey, right on. Congratulations, Caleb. Okay. Here, how about if I step down here?
I was trying to get out of the camera.
First place. Woo! Green bean. Yeah! Oh, that's awesome. Congratulations. And there's a remote for this that you can change colors with, and then come over and get a photo. Yeah, when you get your award, come over and have a photo. You guys need helmets. Okay, this is the award for the display board, and it is number 2, mustache. Awesome. Okay. You know, this might be the best award of all. This is for perseverance. It's the Spirit Award, the strongest in history. Right on. Yeah. And all you guys worked really hard, so we wish we had a prize for everyone, but great work. Excellent work. Woohoo! Yes. Okay, what a day. Oh, you guys, special announcement. Their Gateway Youth Aviation Foundation is in the driveway on the way out. If you want to sit in an F4 Phantom cockpit, they've driven their portable trailer up, and they're here, and you can do that on your way out. Thank you.